You can tune in to Big 12 Radio on TuneIn. In fact, they'll be there with their setup tomorrow, and he will be there. Ari Temkin joins us on 365 Sports, both on Tuesday and Wednesday. Looking forward to seeing Ari and the guys from Big 12 Radio. Ari, thank you for your time. What's the one or two, in your opinion, biggest questions that we'll try to get answered the next day or two, and what are maybe one or two of the biggest storylines?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest question is Deion Sanders going to be there? With his health status and that situation. I mean, I put it pretty much at a coin flip. Obviously, the expectation is that all coaches are there, but we were surprised when he wasn't at the spring meetings, and then we got our answer as to why he wasn't shortly thereafter because of his health. And I'd imagine that he's trying to get as healthy as he possibly can and lead up to fall camp, which is the most important thing, and that's keeping the main thing. So. It's also interesting that Colorado's sending two quarterbacks. They're bringing both Caden Salter and the 17-year-old and Julian Lewis. So those are kind of two questions that I have. And then, the thing that stood out to me, Smokey, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this, as somebody that's covered the league as long as you have. I can't remember the league being this good and having this much depth along the offensive and defensive lines. To me, like, they've got at least 5 teams that are elite on both lines of scrimmage and offensive and defensive line. And then everybody else is at least good on one of the offensive and defensive line variety. Like Oklahoma State's a team that I don't know how much optimism you can have around Oklahoma State, but I think they're going to have a really good offensive line. BYU's another team. I think they're having a really good defensive line. So, like, to me, there are 5 teams, Baylor included, that are elite on their offensive and defensive lines. And then everybody else across the conference, like, is good on either their offensive or a defensive line, which I can never remember a time where that's been the case. And the other part to that is, like, usually this conference is flush with wide receiver talent, with skill position guys that are really good. And I think they're going to have those this year. Like, for me, their bread is really buttered on their offensive and defensive lines, more so than in any other position, and certainly the skill position.
Ari, this is, I think we've talked about this before, but when you see the superlatives come out and you see Devin Dampier as a newcomer and Sam Levitt, as we start this season, now obviously everything is fluid and can change. This is by far, you mentioned the offensive and defensive lines. That's good news for the quarterbacks, especially on the offensive side, because this is already a deep league when it comes to returning quarterbacks. You start going through blue bloods across the country, and a lot of them have new guys this year.
That's far.
So much forgiveness. Wait, did you say forgiveness like far, or forgiveness like forgiveness? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
I'm hearing far.
Forgiveness. Like forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness.
I'm still hearing far, but whatever.
Introducing Stealth 2 with more carbon for more forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Just hit it.
TaylorMade Golf.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also a huge storyline, Paul. This conference is loaded at quarterback. And, whereas last year it was like Shadur Sanders and then a bunch of other question marks, many of those question marks were answered this past season. And, so BYU is going through it right now, trying to figure out, without Jake Retzloff, who's going to be their quarterback, given the situation they're dealing with there. UCF is probably a little bit unsure. I would be shocked if Julian Lewis started at Colorado, but, you can probably count on one hand the amount of teams that don't have the position solidified, and maybe even less than that. Like, it might even just be UCF, and BYU even might have a sense of who they've got. So, I think that says a lot about the conference, the talent that they have at quarterback. Like, I think they've got maybe 3 NFL quarterbacks, maybe more than that, but at least where the season starts, Sam Levitt, Rocco Becht, and Sawyer Roberts are 3 guys to me that are NFL quarterbacks. I think Baron Morton has a chance to add his name to the list if he can have a big year this year. So, I don't think there's any question that this, and then especially compared to the SEC and the Big Ten, who lost, a boatload of experienced and well-known starters. A bunch of these teams are recycling 4- and 5-star quarterbacks through, but in terms of, known guys, it's basically, Vanderbilt and Florida, and a few other here or there. But for the most part, it's, the most experienced and best quarterbacks from before the season starts are in the Big 12.
Ari, I'm very curious. I always look forward to talking to Kalani Sitake, but I'm very curious of, just how much he gets peppered with the quarterback questions and what he'll have to say about that. But now that we know there's a resolution, how much does your opinion on BYU change knowing that Jake Retzloff will not be the quarterback?
Honestly, not that much. Look, I think Retzloff took a huge step 2 years ago to last year. Like, he was basically an unplayable quarterback 2 years ago. And, he was pretty good last year, but I thought like some of their losses down the stretch of the season, like the Kansas game, for instance, like he makes a few throws in that game and BYU wins it. Like down the stretch of this season, he was needing to make one or two more plays over the course of multiple games that he just couldn't make. Like, there were just throws where he was missing down the field. And it's like, if he makes those, these games are over. And instead, he's an interception and then his team gets an interception. It's a pick six and they take it to the house. Like fumble recovery for touchdown. Like their defense was so opportunistic last year that I think it sort of washed away some of the issues that he had down the stretch of some of those games. Now, again, he was improved and there's no reason I think that he wasn't going to improve going into this season, but they've got talent at the position. I mean, I think Bear Bachmeier to me is going to be the guy that starts. I'm also super excited for the Bear Tiger Bachmeier connection because Bear's brother Tiger also transferred in. Mm-hmm. So apologies to Hank Bachmeier, who got really the short end of the stick in terms of names in that family. There's Hank, there's Bear, and there's Tiger. But I mean, he's the guy that's going to start for me. And I didn't think BYU was going to be a top of the Big 12 kind of team this year. Like I think BYU they've got a lot of talent. They're really good on defense, and I'm excited to see there. But like, I still had major questions about their offense, and that doesn't change with the Retzloff situation to me. So I still think they're a middle of the pack, potentially 8-9 win team in this conference, and I'm excited to see what Bear Brockmeyer brings to the table.
Of the teams that last year did not make a bowl game, KU did. Utah. No, they did not. That's right.
Baylor made sure of that.
Baylor knocked them out at McLean Stadium. They had some quality wins, though. They did. In fact, beating BYU is one of them. Which of the teams that were not bowl eligible do you think, is there one in particular you think will absolutely rocket back into the race this year?
I've got three teams, actually, that I think could be bowl eligible teams that were not last year. But let me first say on the Baylor-Kansas side, there were some weird Baylor-Kansas things last year. So Baylor lost to BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State. Those are three teams that Kansas beat consecutively. They're the first team ever to not be a top 25 team and knock off three consecutive top 25 teams. So it was funny. Baylor lost to those three teams. Kansas knocked those three teams off, and then Baylor absolutely laid the tar to Kansas and just completely dominated them on the ground. I mean, it was unbelievable what Baylor did in that game. So just a weird situation last year where Baylor lost those three games, Kansas won those three games, and then obviously it was decided in the field the last week of the season, which held Kansas out of being bowl eligible. But I do think Kansas returns to bowl eligibility this year. They lose a ton, but I think their offensive line is still going to be very good. Jalen Daniels is back at quarterback, and even though he's had some injury issues, I think Isaiah Marshall behind him, who was a high 3-star recruit coming in last year out of Detroit, he's got a very similar skill set to Jalen Daniels. So I think they're way better positioned to potentially lose Daniels if that is the case this year. I like Utah as a team. Like, what's funny is I thought Utah was going to be kind of underrated coming into the season, and reading some Phil Steele, reading some other magazines and publications and stuff, they're almost now overrated. Now, I do think they return to a bowl game. They're just too good up front on offense. And like, their offense was so bad last year. So bad. The fact that the defense didn't completely check out says a lot about their defense, their defensive makeup. So like, I don't know how much better they're going to be on offense, but they're going to be better on offense. And so based on having Devin Dampier, based on having a robust rushing attack, like I absolutely think Utah should be a bowl team this year. And then I think Cincinnati as well. And look, Scott Satterfield probably needs it in order to keep his job. With Brendan Sorsby coming back, there was a weird dynamic, and I'm excited to ask Satterfield about this. Like Sorsby, the way he finished the season, he wanted to run the ball a lot more than earlier on in the season. I wonder if there was an injury or something he was dealing with, because he became much more of a rushing threat quarterback, and he didn't want to throw as much. And I thought that hampered the Cincinnati offense. They're really good to me across their offensive line, and then they're really good off their defensive line too, with Dante Corleone, probably the most underrated player in college football, coming back to man their defensive line. So I think they've got a ton of talent. Joe Royer at tight end broke Travis Kelce's single season receptions record for a tight end last season. I think, he's in line to have a really good season this year. So I think Cincinnati be the third team I think could be a bowl team this year.
What was your reaction to the reaction, and also Tech getting the 5-star offensive lineman out of Mansfield at Lake Ridge High School, and how that set off a storm of what the hell's going on to, hey, by the way, congratulations, you got a hell of a deal.
Well, I mean, we could all be united in how upset Texas fans were, right? I mean, far be it from Texas Tech to still find ways to beat Texas long distance. But Felix Ojo was going to Texas, and 9 times out of 10, that guy goes to Texas, but this ain't that time. And look, this is a new era. You know, it's funny. We're now figuring out why Nick Saban was complaining so much about NIL, because while he said it was making things unfair, what he really meant was it was tipping the fairness scales away from blue bloods like Alabama more towards a much more fair and equitable system. You know, I know we've talked a ton, guys, on this spot about the importance of recruiting 4- and 5-star kids and how much of a straight line that makes towards winning national championships in college football. Well, I mean, Texas Tech lands Ojo. So this is now 3 5-stars in the 2026 class already in the Big 12. We talked about the 2 quarterbacks. You know, we'd never seen a 5-star quarterback commit to a Big 12 school. Well, now they've added a 5-star offensive tackle and the number 1 offensive tackle in the country to that list. They're also in, as we found out this morning from a crystal ball projection, on a 4-star in this class and another 5-star in next year's class. So they're rolling right now. And look, I mean, you know, if Texas signs a guy or Ohio State signs a guy, it's because it's Texas or Ohio State. But if Texas Tech or Baylor signs that 4 or 5-star kid, it's because of money. But the money is fairly equal across the board, guys. Like if Sark wanted to land Ojo and he got a call from Ojo's representatives that were like, hey, this is how much it's going to cost. Like Sark could find that money in the couch cushions. You know, don't tell me that it's about money when it comes down to Texas Tech, but it's not when it comes down to Texas. Those teams have recruited at a high level, and for Texas, much longer than Ohio State has, because they weren't winning and they were still recruiting at a high level because of the money that they have. So suddenly now everybody has money and money to spend, and Texas fans are complaining about it when it's like, well, that was what helped get you up to that spot anyways. Like the Pancake Club and infusing money into your NIL is the whole reason you landed Campbell and some of those offensive tackles and Kelvin Banks that got you to the playoff this past year. So shut your mouth, okay? Because that's exactly what you've been using. It's the same playbook. So it's not any different if Tech is doing it. It's exactly what Texas does. So I love it. I mean, I think what they've done in terms of their infrastructure, in terms of funding everything, in terms of, you know, the cohesion between what Cody Campbell is doing and what Joey McGuire and James Blanchard are doing, it's on another level. And yeah, I mean, we should get used to this, because a rising tide lifts all boats. What Tech is doing, what Houston did with Henderson, what BYU is doing with their 5-star, like this speaks to recruits across the nation that the Big 12 is somewhere you can go, somewhere you can win at a high level, and somewhere you can get to the NFL.
No, Ari, this is how it works. If you have money for a long time, then you're allowed to spend it on things. If you're new money, then you have to wait until you cross some sort of barrier to be allowed to spend money and get people to come and make your football team better. This is not, this is not egalitarian, you know.
Right.
Look, we're not, this is not France. This is America. You know, it's kind of silly that everybody, and I think part of it is just like the psychology of like, I can't believe, you know, they're going there because he got money. Yeah, it's legal. It's not a big deal. Just like, you know, you would go somewhere for money. We'd all go somewhere for money. So why are we judging now?
And there's a straight line. Like the Pancake Club was established at Texas, where they were paying offensive linemen tons of money, and they were able to galvanize their base to create that money. And like the Pancake Club was announced, and then the next day they land DJ Campbell and Kelvin Banks. So like you're going to tell me that was not the exact same thing that you did? You know, and remember, Texas was terrible for a decade, and yet they still landed top recruiting classes. So the same, you know, all these people in the mentions of like, oh, I hope you like losing. Like you're all these Texas fans, like where were you for a decade when they were recruiting at a high level and losing? The one thing I'll say to you, Paul, too, is I really hope that Deion shows up, because what does Deion have against Florida State, man? Hakeem Williams now, like he is going straight for his alma mater. Like he has it out for Florida State.
You know why? Because he walked in, he said, I would like this job. And they said, we're going to interview some other people. And then they hired Mike Norvell and not him. And he's like, my face is on the damn wall out there. And they're like, yeah, we appreciate it, but we'd like to just see you get some other coaching experience. You know, it's been really bad here with Willie Taggart. We'd like to see you get more. And he was like, all right, well, go to hell. And there you have it. So
I mean, Travis Hunter, Hakeem Williams, like he's flipping 4-star, 5-star guys. Like there's a long list of guys that were supposed to go to Florida State or went to Florida State that now are in Colorado. So
hey,
Deion has it out for them.
I'll tell you this. It would not surprise me if he has, you know, somebody there that tells him where he's going, where they're going, and then he just like waits for them to leave and then swoops in.
And he's only doing it at Florida State. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Ari, how personal should we take it that there's no media poll this year?
I mean, we're bad at this, guys. Like,
Yeah.
let's be honest here. So, yeah, a big reason is because of perception. And the Big 12 media has not done a good enough job collectively of picking the right teams to win the Big 12 year over year. And so when Arizona State goes and wins the Big 12 the year that they were picked last, and it clearly impacted the AP poll because Arizona State, as John Wilner from the Mercury News pointed out, Arizona State was not ranked for the first time until mid-November, and they were 8-2. Without a preseason Big 12 poll that has them last, I don't know if that's the case. Now, you can also make the case that the Associated Press voters are also really bad at voting, so they also shouldn't vote because that does play a role seemingly in the college football playoff rankings and everything else. So, yeah, I would love to see the AP poll preseason go away. If I'm the Big 12, I'm lobbying for that to start week 3 like it does at the FCS level because perception is reality in college football, and the Big 12 does not have a good perception behind it right now. I think it's starting to flip a little bit, and I think some of the offseason talk around Arizona State and Texas Tech will help to flip that. But, guys, yeah, I mean, that's a huge perception issue that this conference is trying to overcome. And so, yeah, if I'm the conference, I'm lobbying the Associated Press to not release a poll in the preseason, to not release a poll until week 3. Now, they're not going to do it because, well, I don't know why they wouldn't do it. They're trying to sell newspapers or I don't know what.
They're trying to, what the networks love to be able to say they have number 1 against number 4.
Yeah.
Or number 2 against 3 or whatever. That's one of the TV broadcast early on. It is great talking points leading up to it, but it always is neat to see after the year how many were completely whiffed.
But like it's good talking point. The problem is it plays too large of a role.
Oh, it does
in the outcome of the season.
There's no question.
So like I totally agree with you, Smokey. Like it's great to have, but the fact that like the first college football playoff rankings come out and it's basically mirrors the AP says that none of these people have any idea what they're doing. We should go back to the computer rating system, even if it's just a replacement for the AP. Have the computers rank the preseason top 25 teams. I would much rather that than writers who, quite frankly, are only watching their teams and don't have any sense of anybody else.
Thank you, buddy. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Look forward to it. Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn. He'll see him tomorrow along with the setup that they have